things I have learned over the 40 odd years of doing this kind of work, and the growth and the lessons and doing it the hard way. And over that time, the first things when I was in my 20s and I was going to meditation classes all the time, I was building up a lot of energy. So I was going to meditation classes 3 times a week, and I was learning how to bring energy into the body. I was realigning my chakras all the time. I was understanding how energy works, how you can absorb it into your body. And I wasn't giving any of it out, right? I was just learning and I was absorbing all this energy. And then I found that crystals would just break at home. I had a beautiful crystal vase that was sitting on my windowsill in the kitchen, doing the dishes, and it just shattered. I had a glass tabletop that just shattered. I used to walk past cars and their alarms would go off. I'd try to use the FPOS machine at a shop and it wouldn't work. And I thought, I don't know, because back then I probably had a really big ego, being young, and thought this was all fascinating, and I was putting it down to, oh my God, I've got energy following me, or something like that. I just learnt from a very wise teacher that I have to give out the energy that I'm absorbing. So the moment that I started doing readings and the moment I started using my energy, healing energy on people, all that stopped because I was circulating energy, not holding it. I also learnt very early on to not just blurt out stuff to people who didn't ask for it. Again, that was my ego wanting to, I knew something about somebody. I got a psychic glimpse into their future and then just blurted out what I thought was the right thing to do. And I learned very quickly and very early on in my stage that you don't do that unless you asked. If somebody asks me, I'm happy to help, but I don't just go around. I wouldn't go up to any random people anywhere and tell them something just because I saw it or I felt it, because it's invading somebody's privacy. You don't know the reaction you're going to get. They might not want to hear it. I had to learn the difference between ego and higher consciousness, and what higher consciousness is just wanting to help the other person from what they're asking, not my opinion. I can't throw my opinion into an answer. I can do that if I'm just being Vicky. But if they're asking me on a psychic level and I have to go into that space, it's not my opinion. It's got to be what's coming from the other side. I learned that a lot of the time it's our own higher consciousness that's giving us all the answers, not guides, especially when it comes to materialistic stuff. Guides could give a rat's ass about materialistic stuff here on earth. The wanting of money, wanting of houses, wanting of relationships, wanting of the human stuff. The guides are only interested in the spiritual lessons. So any time it came down to what I physically wanted in a manifesting kind of physical way, that was coming from my own higher consciousness and not from guides, because think about it, they are higher consciousness. They don't have to have the materialistic stuff. That's when we're asking, can I have a sign? Could you give me numbers? Could you give me feathers? Could you give me... That's us manifesting it. You know what you think about and focus on, and you send out. That you're bringing it back. If you really, really, really want to hear from a loved one, like somebody died, and you're like, give me a sign. I need to know you're around me. You're asking for it. So then they can give it to you. And because you're asking for it and you're looking for it, that's when you'll see it. Because you want to see it. It's a lot like that law of attraction thing where you're bringing it back into yourself. But most of the time it's your own higher consciousness that's drawing that into your energy. What else did I learn? I learned that I used to think there was one soul that recycled. And then this was after I'd been through my near-death experience and got shown when I was actually energy and I was there and they showed me so much stuff. That's when it became very evident that the particles of our soul just, they fragment. I was going to say disintegrate. That's not the word. They split and they go back into melding with all other. Kind of, if you thought about, if you had a jar and you trapped air in a jar and screwed the lid on, and that air was trapped in the jar. When you take the lid off, the air releases again and other air from the outside goes in and it merges again. That's kind of like what the soul is. It forms back into energy that belonged in other places. So when it's a fragment of that soul that comes back, because I used to ask the question all the time. So if my grandpa died, or when my grandpa died, and I feel like, I used to say things like, I feel like his soul came back into one of my sons. Then how do I still connect with my grandpa? That's how I used to think. Like, if his soul is here and now his soul is living in my son, how can I still connect to? This is where I learned that it's only fragments of the soul. There is still that residual energy of a record of my grandfather. Part of his soul is now experiencing life in one of my sons. So it's not the whole entire soul. So that was another big lesson that I had to learn. I used to love, when I was young, I used to love the whole idea of something being haunted or something being, that's the ego again. And you certainly learn as you get older that's it's the ego. It's not the actual truth of what's going on. There is so much residual energy here. Energy can break away from you. And you know that when you feel someone, like you're standing next to somebody, without saying a word, you can feel something about them, right? You can feel if they're dangerous. You can feel if they are loving. You can feel if they are sad. Without saying a word, your energy is feeling their energy. That energy is everywhere, and it can be left in places. Have you ever sat in a seat, like someone's sitting in a seat on a bus, and they may be overthinking something, like really, really worrying. So their energy is this really, really worrying, radiating out of them. And they get up and they get off the bus, and then you get on at the next stop and you sit in the seat and you feel odd. You start feeling like you need to worry about something, or something feels heavy, or the seat doesn't feel right and you want to move. That's how we are all connecting with energy. I don't understand why we have racism, because we've all probably lived as in different countries as different skin colors. We've already experienced that. So why in this particular life would we judge that if we've already existed in that life? Another question I always asked was, why did my soul choose to be born to the parents I chose, to the country I chose to be in, to the environment they lived in? They were just mediocre parents, and my mum was sick for the whole of my life. So why did I choose that journey? Like, why that country? Why did I choose Australia to be born? So I often think, like, some people will say that their life is really hard, but if you get back onto that soul level and say, well, why did you choose those parents, that culture? Like, what from previous existences does your soul need to experience in this existence? And that's why you are where you are.